Okay, I'm happy to have also a slightly different text and speech format here today on the schedule. I find that quite important or interesting. And I'd like to introduce you to Laura Hatting. She's an artist, a musician, and a writer. And she is going to perform like a text she has written now, recently. Okay, let's welcome Laura.
Yeah, thank you. So, hi, as said, I'm Laura. I can't believe I'm actually getting paid for this. And yeah, maybe before I start, I only got to rehearse today. Like, also, I'm actually at the outer border of my intellectual capacities. Like, I didn't get proper sleep in weeks and shit, and January hasn't been nice to me. So, under these conditions, this is how this whole text was written. So, during reading it to myself twice today, it just turned out to be a bit more chaotic than I expected. I mean, like, they're always chaotic, but this one is especially chaotic, so please forgive me some jumps or whatever. It may make some turns that don't appear the most rational. Also, I probably made some grammar mistakes, which I also asked to kindly excuse because English is not my first language. So, my text is called Epitaph on the Death of a Certainty, or How to Be Angry. So what got me here was the lucky circumstance that Melanie happened to be one of the 15 people audience that attended my last speech that I back then in August at a small community event hosted by friends. Hi, Jennifer. Called Mirage, where I was giving a speech on the topic, why is the edgelord not dead yet? In this text, I basically stated that the reason why we're allowing edgelords amongst us is because they're justifying our own mediocrity. I was planning on digging further into that question, but the process brought up another one that, for selfish reasons, is more important to me. That is, could the edgelord being tolerated for the maintenance of boredom and my rage being appreciated for the maintenance of boredom be the same thing? For the purposes of those who don't know what an edgelord is, I have picked some definitions that made sense to me from Urban Dictionary. Number 1, someone especially posting on the internet who uses shocking and nihilistic speech and opinions that they themselves may or may not actually believe to gain attention and come across as a more dangerous and unique person. 2, commonly describes a person on the internet who seemingly goes out of their way to be as polarizing as possible without adding any substance or reason. 3, tries and fails to randomly insert edgy shock value content, often in the forms of extreme nihilism, feigned sociopathy, and all-around piss-poor attempts to look cool and brooding when he wants attention, into conversations either edgy content or he himself has no part in, or otherwise does so randomly because he feels the conversation is dead and he wants attention to be focused on him for a change. Probably does all of this in an ongoing and vain attempt to make others miserable with shock value, so as to bring them down to whatever level of misery he likely deals with. If he can successfully do this, then someone's as equally miserable as he seems to be, and he'll have the superiority having brought them down there all on his own. Now comes my first favorite quote, because it kind of frames the reasons why I'm here. The most toxic of all edgelords is an edgelord boss. This is someone fortunate enough to have significant power in an organization due to their edgelordiness, meaning that any possibility of introspection or change is zero. Working for an edgelord boss is the most soul-destroying thing you can do in life, and they can often be found sucking the life out of the music, film, and video game industries. It is advised to seek alternative employment if you find yourself working for an edgelord. And here comes my absolute favorite, because someone went all out it's really an outstanding linguistic move to explain to his former troll friends why and in which way trolling online is a philosophical practice. Wait, I have to sound good for this one. Trolling is the exploration of the contrary. It serves as a primer to ignite the stupidity lying dormant within the zeal of an ideology or proposition. A successful troll can be successful by adopting a point of view contrary to their own and exploiting its weakness before a fellow proponent. A troll knows his enemy by trolling as his enemy. A good troll plays a polemicist with the hope of exposing the arrogance and irrationality of his target. A naive and unsuspecting victim is much more likely to deal a statement in absolutes if approached by someone appearing equally vehement to the contrary. A troll must sustain their position, however unlikely or immoral it may be. Ecumenicism does not exist in the world of trolls. It is no coincidence that induction of emotional outbursts in others is a salient feature of successful trolling. Indeed, it has been suggested that this property allows for a redefining of trolling as a critical analysis of human nature by socially deconstructive commentary. In addition to being a valuable addition to discourse, trolling is a leisurely activity. One who opposes conventional wisdom need not be a revolutionary nor a fool, merely a connoisseur of the fruit of uncertainty, which gives so many imperious souls the indigestion that is rage. Just as witticism is an epigram on the death of a feeling, a successful troll is concluded with an epitaph on the death of a certainty. And this last quote brings me kind of back to my last speech, the one on was the edgelord not dead yet, where back then, after a short reference here, a short discourse to, for example, Hannah Arendt's or Simone de Beauvoir's moralism of amoralism, or as I called it, defense of the edgelord, I stated that I will neither join the moral philosophers club of defending the transgressor as an ethically heroic position, nor get started with the actual ethical question that is postponed by doing so, which is asking what those morals then would be that the edgelord heroically overcomes. This is what I'm afraid I'm about to do now, since the original question of why is the edgelord not dead yet, as well as this invitation to give the speech here, has, as stated in the start, led me to asking myself whether my rage's function may also only be the maintenance of boredom, and therefore asking about the possibilities of anger, and it all starts with that very death of a certainty. So certainty, first of all, and as implied in Urban Dictionary's definitions as I presented them, is a matter of power. It's the amount of certainty that states hierarchy in any social constellation. It's drawing the line between classes, races, genders, identities, and countries. It's being certain of getting further in life that more or less guarantees those who are allowed certainty to get further in life. Whereas, depending on your multidimensional social status, you may be tricked into being uncertain of the most basic realities, #gaslight. And it's the angst of permanent uncertainty that conforms everyone else. In other words, it's been the ruling milieu's certainty that due to everyone else's uncertainty has conformed all the others, causing the hopeless boredom that even drove the edgelord to uncontrollable random outrage aimed at literally anyone who seemed weak enough just to once feel power by enforcing his victim's attention. And this is why edgelordism is such a topic to me, because I feel that the edgelord and me actually share a lot of common features. Otherwise, I wouldn't stand here and try to get your attention. Natalie Wynn, FKA ContraPoints, who's dedicated a whole series of incredibly funny and philosophically inspiring YouTube videos to the issue of alt-right lost boys, aka edgelords, rightly states in her video, What's Wrong with Capitalism Part 1, that, I quote, political dissent begins with the vaguest feeling that something is wrong, and a lot of people have that feeling. But the problem with vague feelings is that they can be channeled into any possible direction. The same vague angst can lead people to communism or fascism or anything in between, end of quote. So that's what we have in common. My relation to the edgelord is the vision of the evil twin that reminds me of the destructive capacity my anger could have if I let it go the wrong direction. And I often enough find myself actually believing that total refusal is the only possible resistance, or that attacking first is the only chance to get in control. I just then am high-nosed enough to consider myself too dialectical to actually act on it. But what edgelords actually do, but sadly aiming against the absolutely wrong people, is taking the kind of powerlessness and frustration that causes those ideas to the extremes I'd like myself to sometimes. So, unlike I vehemently declared in my last speech, and just as a cause and not community-wise, I indeed do feel empathy for certain aspects of edgelordism. For late-stage capitalist dystopia created by the selfish politics of a generation and milieu and a class that would be dead if they wouldn't cling to their privileges has now finally managed to expand alienation from labor through the power of the commodity to alienation from persuasion and emotion through making them a commodity. Or, in less academic terms, they finally managed to own our feelings. So therefore, I can totally feel the pretty childish idea that the only way to protect your ideas from exploitation is to aim those ideas at nothing but pissing people off. That even if the idea will be misused by a consumer group beyond your control, that if it will be turned into a commodity, whether you want it or not, it shall at least be consumed uneasily. That the only way to get one's legitimate rage caused by these conditions of imposed boredom through the layers of ignorance disguised as convenience is to hurt on purpose. And that they deserve this treatment. So here's why I therefore state that it's actually urgent to establish a new and not male rampage asshole kind of edgelordism, because in my opinion, art is making or trying to make too much sense right now. And I think it does so to suppress the less controllable outputs of this vague feeling that something is wrong. And that therefore this enlightened discourse that is now all over the place, and as I am advocating it right now, appears to have become a tool of conservatism itself. For pretentious reasons, I have structured the following argument in 3 parts featuring subtitles. Part 1 is named The Relation of Exploited Moralism and the Increasing Guilt That Comes with Spending Outrageous amounts of money on private property. I'm not naive enough to believe that the edgelord style of not giving a shit operating within the structure of the art world or any strategy at all will prevent any opinion or production I present in a framework such as this from being commodified. I also, within the given conditions, actually am absolutely pro selling out. I'm happy for any artist who can make a living, and I think that doubting artists, philosophers, musicians, or whoever and whatever else is loaded with this old school idea of meaningfulness in their truthfulness regarding their passion for doing so is just another shitty hypocrite trick by a capitalist ideology to trap any form of criticism by blaming the position this criticism is voiced from onto the individual. This said, I'm being bothered by the way in which art or more ideas have been sold out lately. And what I mean is this alienation from persuasion, blah, 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 commodity. The reason why I can't understand the art edgelords who just does whatever the fuck he wants is that, according to my observation, doing so is actually the only subversive action possible right now. The edgelord is just doing it for the wrong reason, but the strategy is right. So, what edgelords and trolls basically do, aim, and compete for is the total negation of meaning by A, randomly decontextualizing information for pure joy and the joy of suffering of others caused by the sad death of a certainty, and therefore B, ignoring or disregarding the political implications of doing so. As hopefully clear to the few who heard my last speech, and now to clarify it to all of you, I politically am absolutely not in favor of this type of edgelordism. I know that it's dangerous, and I know that it's reinforcing, for example, racism, misogyny, trans and homophobia by, for example, defending slurs against those minorities as nothing but a word, or by blaming those who are traumatized by those words as for being too sensitive. Despite that, the only targets that edgelords have are people of their own or lower hierarchy, and that's exactly what capitalism is about. But as said, I think artistically it may not be the worst response. I might be wrong, I might be an overprivileged brat, and therefore just in the position to criticize the representational effort fat art biennials, festivals, museums, and even galleries have recently made. But the simplest way to phrase the roots of my skepticism concerning art institutions' latest empathy for minorities and political activism is quoting a 2018 meme featuring a picture of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer labeled with the slogan, "Deviation from the norm will be punished unless exploitable." In the past 2 years, I've always explained the funny coincidence of individuals or institutions' interest in featuring me in their show rising linearly to the amount I roast their businesses, with just telling myself that it's simply image-wise more clever to bring the roast inside before it comes from the outside. And that's probably still a thing, but there's more to it than this sort of post for the strategy. 2 more things, actually, and they go together. So here we're at pretentious subtitle 2. The relation of guilty consumers and an ethical product, bracket open, as demonstrated by reform culture around 100 years ago, but now with artworks, bracket closed. The one obvious thing about the increased demand for discursive art is, of course, that art that is art to talk about is getting around faster, therefore, despite its market value, increases its prestigious value, and so on. But it's the less economic reason I see for this political turn that interests me more. It is that absolutely no one can ignore the worsening gap of distribution of resources anymore, or simpler, the worsening of poverty. Depending on your political stand, the response to this inevitable notion would either be rage, radical left, or pity, bourgeois left, or incremation, bourgeois right, or also rage, but now paired with a superiority complex, which would make the radical right. But no matter how rich and ignorant, or rich and naturalizing of your own wrongdoing, or rich and charity donating you are, no one is getting around at least witnessing it. And no matter how well-settled, educated, middle-class, and well-advocating, or well-settled, educated, middle-class, and politically analyzing, or well-settled, educated, middle-class, and platform-giving you are, you will not get around witnessing that the rich who donated for your representational group show have witnessed it. And although all this witnessing, of course, does not and will not change any of the mentioned behavior, what it, I believe, did indeed change is the increased desire to explain, or rather to justify it. In What's Wrong with Capitalism Part 2, Win takes a food channel called Worth It, run by some Zoomers, that's the generation below me, who try a $2K pizza compared to a $2 pizza, for an example. The $2 pizza wins the competition. Not only because the 2K pizza that doesn't follow any culinary principle than exclusively containing the world's most expensive ingredients tastes like shit, but mostly, as the foodies state in their review, that literally eating $2,000 feels morally wrong under the given social conditions in the USA. The difference here is that pizza, unlike an artwork or an art show, has, as far as I know, never been claimed to be a symbol for a broader belief or philosophy, despite Breaking Bad. So, although any connoisseur of a $2,000 pizza, except for those YouTube Zoomers, would in my eyes make perfect guillotine food, there's not that much of a reason to judge or justify it despite its probably horrible taste. But what to do with the artwork that, in terms of its customer scheme, applies to exactly the group of people the 2K pizza addresses? A product of mind, not gut, that has more or less been associated with progressive worldviews, freedom, and the human for ages. An idea that, by the way, goes to the trash right now. Putting those two things, the up-assed ethical assumption concerning artists and artworks and the immorality of affording a 2K pizza together, will lead to an ethical paradox our well-donating art lovers would rather avoid. So here comes part 3. Danger control by emptying the aggressor. Now what actually comes now as that is the revived idea of ethical consumption, and I'll elaborate on this rather provocative subtitle later. So, what biennials, in my humble opinion, have now come up with is basically still selling the 2K pizza, but now it's vegan and organic. Not only that it would be impossible for the art institutions to continue ignoring marginalized perspectives in times of online identity politics anyhow, it would, for the reason of trending ethical consumption, simply not pay off. Prestigiously, it just doesn't look good anymore to only have white cis painters represented in your gallery, so getting those representational artworks across may be a bit quicker right now, unless it's a really well-known cis male. But also psychologically, it probably just feels much better to spend an amount of money that could cover the entire socio-economical damage caused by the Familienbonus model on a single inanimate object for your private collection, or in order to sell it to someone else's private collection, if it is for the widespread of a feminist position. than if you spent the same amount of money that you know could never be earned by labor on an inanimate object that just looks good. So, about the ethical consumption, if I didn't articulate that precisely enough, I believe that the idea of ethical consumption to be as bullshitty as the idea of per se progressive art. Not only for the well-known slogan that there is no ethical consumption under capitalism, but even worse, because I think designing ethical products serves two different reasons. The one is comforting wealthy people so they don't feel a need to take action, and the other one is to remind us, the less wealthy people, that the only freedom of choice given is the choices within consumerism. And although no one should feel guilty for being privileged, people who buy a 2K pizza or a horrendously expensive inanimate object for their private collection should bath in guilt. And here's the point, and here's the point where I elaborate on my rather provocative subtitle. Because since this is not about organic food but artistic positions, I believe there's more to the latest crave for discourse in the arts than only the urge to justify extreme wealth by making it vegan and recyclable. It is related to my first explanation that it is more clever to invite the position that proposes to end you before it actually does, but the danger control goes further in a much meaner way than expected. It is that the demand for a meaning by a market that by its definition is supposed to replace meaning with an exchange value is not only tranquilizing the class that rules over it within its ethical comfort zone, it is by doing so emptying any chance to actually produce meaning for those who engage in, for example, political activism or philosophy or even identity politics or wherever the market is currently demanding meaning from, whose main or only power lies within the belief that their effort, their thoughts, their history and existence or whatever does mean something. But in the face of any action, position, or opinion doomed to become nothing but another commodity that, like any other commodity, will be taken for granted, exchanged, and forgotten, the strategy of those disciplines to break through the silence that causes their suppression turns into the exact opposite, becoming a tool for maintaining ignorance. Deviation from the norm will be punished unless exploitable, but the punishment and the exploitation happen to be the same thing. So here it's, as I supposed before, not an invitation to calm the critical or better the raging subject anymore, but to sterilize the dangerous potential of its anger. And that's why I'm in favor of the edgelord strategy when it comes to artistic practice. Any subculture of the past centuries that turned edgelord did so for the desperate attempt to not have its meaning sucked up by the culture industry. The problem was that in most cases they simply had no clue what that meaning was themselves. Otherwise, we would have spared us from a lot of stage injuries and body fluid spits and drug overdoses and church burnings and political fanatism. But whatever meaning that was, all their meanings had this, as Wynne said it, vague notion that something is wrong in common. And in practice, it was always about finding form and a community for this vague rage. And the start of their edgelordism, as I see it, was always trying to find a way to protect their rage and their community from being exploited. And I think it urgently needs ways to do exactly so, to stay inaccessible to those who only want to consume a community or faith, but without causing harm to others or kicking downwards. And the first mission to accomplish for avoiding this kind of violence within one's own artistic edgelordism is, in my eyes, to try to remember what one meant. I once made a joke on the internet that went like, the art scene is just reality TV for people who trade their heritage. And I was quite serious about it. As said, I know that these conditions will not change, and I'm well aware that also the anger that I present to you right here serves no other purpose than maintaining Vienna's laziness, because someone else once in a while is doing the job of playing the rage clown. I know that, but I just came to the conclusion that if my role is to be that clown, I at least want to have some fun myself. Let's troll. Let's slaughter their certainty. Let's just do shit that looks good, because that's exactly what they deserve. Thank you.